My name is Kellan Brooks, and I used to think marriage was like managing a long-term software project. You plan everything carefully, allocate resources, track milestones, and hope nothing crashes before the deadline. What I didn't anticipate was discovering that my project manager had been running a completely different program behind my back. I'm 38, work as a senior tech project manager for a mid-sized consulting firm in suburban Cleveland, and until 3 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was convincing clients that their impossible timelines weren't actually possible. I've always been the guy who notices details others miss, server logs that don't match, budget discrepancies that seem minor but reveal bigger issues, patterns in data that tell stories people don't want to hear. That attention to detail is probably what saved me from becoming a complete fool. Zoya and I had been married for 8 years. She's 35, works in HR for a healthcare company, and has always been the social one in our relationship. Where I prefer quiet evenings debugging code or reading technical manuals, Zoya thrived on dinner parties, book clubs, and what she called maintaining our social network. I used to admire that about her. I used to think she was filling in my social gaps, making us a more complete team. The first sign something was wrong came in late September. I was working late on a client presentation when I noticed Zoya's car wasn't in the driveway at 11 p.m. She'd mentioned staying late for a team-building dinner, but 11 seemed excessive, even for corporate socializing. When she came home around midnight, she smelled like expensive cologne, not the kind they serve at chain restaurants where her company usually held work events. "How was dinner?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "Oh, you know how these things go," she said, already heading upstairs. Lots of networking, boring conversations about quarterly reviews. She was in the shower for 20 minutes. In 8 years of marriage, Zoya had never taken 20-minute showers after work dinners. She was usually complaining about wanting to get out of her work clothes and into comfortable pajamas as quickly as possible. I started paying attention. The next week, she had another work dinner. This time, I checked her company's social media pages and employee newsletter. No mention of team events, no photos of group dinners. When I casually asked her colleague Jennifer at a neighborhood barbecue about the recent team dinners, Jennifer looked confused. "Team dinners? We haven't had one of those in months. Budget cuts, you know?" That's when I started treating my marriage like a debugging project. Every anomaly got logged, every inconsistency got tracked, every pattern got analyzed. Zoya's phone, which used to sit casually on kitchen counters and coffee tables, was now always face down and within arm's reach. She'd started wearing a perfume I'd never smelled before, something floral and expensive that definitely wasn't the vanilla scent she'd worn for years. There were new clothes in her closet, things I'd never seen her wear, still with tags attached. The credit card statements showed charges at restaurants I'd never been to, at times when she claimed to be at work. Gas station purchases in parts of town she had no reason to visit. A charge for lingerie from a boutique downtown. Lingerie I'd certainly never seen. But the detail that really caught my attention was the coffee. Zoya had always been a tea person. Earl Grey in the morning, chamomile at night, occasionally green tea in the afternoon. Suddenly there were coffee shop charges on her card. Expensive ones. The kind of place where a single drink costs $8 and they spell your name wrong on purpose. I drove by that coffee shop one Thursday afternoon when Zoya claimed to be in back-to-back meetings. Her car was in the parking lot. Through the window, I could see her at a corner table with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, probably late 30s, wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that screamed real estate or sales. They weren't looking at work documents. They were leaning across the table toward each other, and Zoya was laughing in a way I hadn't seen in months. I sat in my car for 45 minutes watching them, watching my wife touch another man's hand across a coffee shop table, watching her smile at him the way she used to smile at me when we were dating, watching her check her phone and then quickly put it away, probably dismissing my texts about dinner plans. That night, I started documenting everything. I'm good with technology, and our house has a decent security system that I'd installed myself 2 years earlier. Motion sensors, door cameras, access logs for the smart lock system. I'd never bothered to check the logs before. Why would I? But now I started reviewing them regularly. The logs showed patterns I hadn't noticed. Days when the front door was accessed during work hours when I was at the office. Days when Zoya claimed to be working late, but the system showed her leaving the house at unusual times. Days when someone else was entering our home. The guest access code had been used 17 times in the past month. I'd never given anyone our guest code except Zoya's sister Sasha, and she lived 2 hours away. I confronted the system logs like I would any other data analysis problem. I exported everything to spreadsheets, created timelines, cross-referenced Zoya's claimed schedule with actual door access times. The picture that emerged was clear and methodical. My wife was having an affair, and she was bringing him to our house. The place where I paid the mortgage, where I'd installed the security system, where I'd spent weekends painting bedrooms and fixing leaky faucets and building the life I thought we were sharing. The rage I felt wasn't the explosive kind you see in movies. It was cold and systematic, like debugging a particularly malicious piece of code. Someone had introduced a virus into my life, and I was going to isolate it, document it, and remove it completely. I started planning. The work conference in Chicago was supposed to be a 3-day event. Database management systems, new project methodologies, the kind of technical deep dive that usually excited me. I'd registered months ago, booked the hotel, arranged for project coverage. Zoya knew I'd be gone from Thursday morning through Saturday afternoon. On Wednesday night, she was unusually affectionate. "I'll miss you," she said, curling up next to me on the couch while I finished some client emails. 3 days feels like forever. "It's just a conference," I replied, not looking up from my laptop. "I'll be back Saturday." "I know, but still, the house feels empty when you're not here." I almost laughed. Based on the access logs, the house was rarely empty when I was gone, but instead I just nodded and said I'd call her every evening. Thursday morning, I loaded my suitcase into the car, kissed Zoya goodbye, and drove toward the highway. But instead of heading to Chicago, I circled back through town and parked at a coffee shop 6 blocks from our house. The same coffee shop where I'd seen Zoya with her mystery man 2 weeks earlier. I'd called in sick to the conference the night before, citing a family emergency. My boss understood. These things happen, and the sessions would be recorded anyway. What he didn't know was that the family emergency was my family, and I was about to handle it myself. At 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. Zoya's sister, Sasha. "Kellan, I need to tell you something," she said without preamble. Sasha had always been direct, sometimes brutally so. It was one of the things I liked about her. "About Zoya." "I'm listening." "She's been lying to you. About where she goes, about who she sees. I have proof." My heart rate increased, but my voice stayed steady. "What kind of proof?" "Photos, text message screenshots, timestamps. She's been meeting someone regularly for 2 months. A real estate agent named Rafe Ketter, and Kellan, they've been using your house." I already knew most of this, but hearing it confirmed by someone else made it real in a way the access logs hadn't. "How do you know?" "Because I've been watching. I was suspicious when she started asking me weird questions about you. Your work schedule, when you traveled, how much you knew about her daily routine. Then I saw them together at a restaurant last week. I followed them." Sasha sent me a series of photos via text. Zoya and the man from the coffee shop entering a hotel. Zoya's car in our driveway at the same time as an expensive black Escalade I didn't recognize. Timestamps showing they'd been in our house for hours while I was at work. "There's more," Sasha continued. "He's planning to come over today. She told him you'd be gone until Saturday. I heard her on the phone with him yesterday. She thought I was in the bathroom." "What time?" 2:30. She's taking a half day from work, told them she had a dentist appointment. I looked at my watch. It was 9:45 a.m. I had 4 hours and 45 minutes to prepare. "Sasha, I need you to do something for me." "Name it." "I need you to send me everything you have. Every photo, every timestamp, every detail. And I need you to call me at exactly 2:25 p.m. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to debug this problem." I drove home and spent the morning preparing. First, I enabled every camera in our security system and set them to continuous recording with cloud backup. Then I activated the guest logging feature on our smart door system, a function that recorded not just access times, but also required verbal identification for anyone using the guest code. I printed out 3 months of access logs, highlighting every instance of unauthorized entry. I printed Sasha's photos and organized them chronologically. I drafted an email to our shared attorney, the one we'd consulted when buying the house, and attached everything, but didn't send it yet. Then I set the dining room table for a meeting. 2 chairs facing each other. A folder containing all the evidence. My laptop open to the security system dashboard. My phone positioned to record audio. At 12:30, I called my office and extended my sick leave through Friday, citing complications with the family emergency. I kept my voice measured, professional, as if this were any other minor disruption instead of my life quietly coming apart. My project manager Arjun offered to handle my client calls. "Everything okay, man?" he asked. "You sound different." "Just dealing with some personal stuff. I'll fill you in next week." He didn't press, for which I was grateful. When the call ended, the house felt unnaturally still. Every small sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the wall clock, standing out more than usual. At 1:15, Zoya texted me. "Hope the conference is going well. Miss you." The phone buzzed against the coffee table, bright and cheerful in a way that felt almost obscene. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then turned it face down. I didn't respond. At 2 p.m., I positioned myself in the living room where I could see both the front door and the driveway. The couch faced the wide front window, sunlight washing the floor in pale rectangles. The security cameras were recording everything. The door system was ready to log our guests. I checked the feeds one last time on my laptop, making sure each timestamp was syncing correctly, every angle unobstructed. My pulse was steady, slower than I would have expected. At 2:20, Zoya's car pulled into the driveway. I watched it through the glass, the familiar shape of it easing into its usual spot. The engine cut, the driver's door opened. There was a brief pause, as if she were gathering herself. Then she stepped out. She walked in carrying her purse and a small overnight bag, clearly not expecting to see me sitting calmly on the couch. Her smile was already forming as the door opened, a reflex she hadn't had time to shut off. "Kellan?" Her voice was sharp with surprise. "You didn't leave for the work conference?" I looked up from my laptop as if I'd just noticed her. "Your sister told me everything." The words landed hard. The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" "Sasha called me this morning. She sent timestamps, addresses, and screenshots. I stayed home on purpose and moved the meeting to our living room." For a moment, she just stood there, frozen between the door and the rug, as if the room itself had tilted. Zoya dropped her bag and took a step toward me. "Kellan? Whatever she told you, she's lying. Sasha has always been jealous of our marriage, you know that." "The access logs don't lie," I said, gesturing toward the printed papers on the dining room table. The neat stacks were impossible to miss from where she stood. Neither do the credit card statements, or the photos of you and Rafe Ketter entering the Marriott downtown. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She tried to recover, but I could see the panic building behind her eyes, the way her breathing went shallow. "You've been spying on me? Going through my personal things?" "I've been debugging a problem in my system. Turns out the problem was malicious code that needed to be removed." "Kellan, you're scaring me. This isn't like you." "You're right. The old me would have confronted you privately, given you a chance to explain, probably believed whatever story you came up with. But I'm not the old me anymore." Zoya moved toward the dining room, saw the evidence laid out like a project presentation. Her hand flew to her mouth, fingers trembling as she scanned the pages, the dates, the familiar addresses. "This is crazy. You can't just—" The doorbell rang. We both looked toward the front door. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and insistent. According to my watch, it was exactly 2:28 p.m. Sasha had been off by 3 minutes, but close enough. "You should get that," I said, not moving from the couch. "I think it's for you." Zoya stood frozen, her face twisting into something between panic and rage. Her eyes flicked from me to the door, then back again. "Kellan, don't do this. Whatever you think you know—" The doorbell rang again. I stood up and walked to the front door, aware that every camera in the house was recording. Each step felt deliberate, final. I could hear Zoya behind me, whispering, "No, no, no," under her breath. I opened the door. The man standing there was exactly who I expected. Tall, well-dressed, holding a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. He was older than he'd looked from a distance, probably closer to 40, with the kind of confident smile that suggested he'd never encountered a problem he couldn't charm his way through. "You must be Rafe," I said pleasantly. "Please, come in." He looked confused, but stepped inside. I could see his expensive Escalade in the driveway behind Zoya's car. "I'm sorry. Do we know each other?" he asked, glancing around the living room. "Not yet, but we're about to. I'm Kellan Brooks. This is my house, and that's my wife." I pointed toward Zoya, who was standing in the doorway to the dining room looking like she wanted to disappear. Rafe's confident smile faltered. "I think there might be some confusion." "No confusion at all. Could you please state your full name for the record?" I pointed toward the camera mounted near the ceiling, its red recording light clearly visible. "What the hell is going on here?" Rafe looked between me and Zoya. Zoya found her voice. "This is a misunderstanding. Kellan, Rafe is just..." "Just what? Just someone who's been using our guest access code 17 times in the past month? Just someone who's been in our house while I was at work? Just someone who's been taking my wife to hotels?" I walked over to my laptop and clicked send on the email I'd drafted to our attorney. "I'm sending the video footage, access logs, and visitor identification to our shared legal counsel right now." Rafe set down the wine and flowers. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble." "Too late for that." I pulled out a manila envelope from the dining room table. "Here's your copy of the separation notice I filed this morning. Zoya's copy is right there next to the evidence folder." The room went completely quiet, except for the hum of the security cameras and the sound of Zoya's rapid breathing. "You can't do this," Zoya said, her voice breaking. "You can't just... Actually, I can. And I just did." I walked back to the front door and opened it. "Rafe, thanks for stopping by. Your visit has been very educational for everyone involved." He looked at Zoya one more time, then back at me. Without another word, he walked out. I watched through the window as he got in his Escalade and drove away, leaving the wine and flowers on our coffee table like evidence of a crime scene. Zoya sank into one of the dining room chairs, staring at the papers spread across the table. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to document everything properly." I sat down across from her. "Long enough to make sure this conversation and everything leading up to it is legally admissible." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "What happens now?" "Now you pack your things and find somewhere else to stay. The separation notice gives you 72 hours to collect your personal belongings. After that, any remaining items will be considered abandoned property." "Kellan, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can't do anything. You made your choice and I made mine. The difference is, I made mine with full information." I stood up and walked toward the stairs. "I'll be in my office for the next hour, giving you privacy to make your calls and pack. When I come back down, I expect you to be gone." Halfway up the stairs, I turned back. "Oh, and Zoya? I changed all the access codes. Don't bother trying to come back." The neighborhood found out about Zoya and me before I told anyone. That's the thing about suburban drama. It spreads faster than a software update, and usually with about as many bugs. Howard Kellerman, our next-door neighbor, had apparently witnessed Rafe's hasty exit from our driveway Thursday afternoon. Howard was retired, spent most of his time maintaining his lawn to golf course standards, and had a talent for being outside doing yard work whenever anything interesting happened on our street. Friday morning, I was loading my coffee maker when Howard appeared at my kitchen window, gesturing for me to come outside. "Kellan, buddy, everything okay over there?" he asked the moment I stepped onto the back porch. Howard was 62, built like a former linebacker, and had the kind of direct communication style that came from 30 years in construction management. "Define okay," I said. "Well, yesterday I saw Zoya come home in the middle of the day, which was weird because she never comes home for lunch. Then I saw some guy in an Escalade pull up, real fancy car, and he went inside with flowers and wine like he was going to a party." I sipped my coffee and waited. Then about 20 minutes later, he comes flying out of there like his pants were on fire, gets in his car, and peels out. Zoya's car was still there, but I didn't see her leave until real late, maybe 9 or 10 at night, and she had suitcases. "Sounds like you had an eventful afternoon," I said. Howard studied my face. "You want to tell me what happened, or should I just assume what I'm assuming?" I liked Howard. He was nosy, but he was also the kind of neighbor who'd help you move furniture or lend you tools without asking questions. He deserved a straight answer. "Zoya was having an affair. I caught them. She's moved out." Howard nodded slowly. "The guy in the Escalade?" "Rafe Ketter. He's a real estate agent." "Son of a dog." Howard shook his head. "I'm sorry, man. That's rough." "It's actually been rough for months. Yesterday was just the resolution. You need anything? Help moving stuff, someone to talk to, beer, and terrible advice? I might take you up on the beer." By Friday afternoon, Howard had apparently shared the news with his wife Margaret, who shared it with her book club, which included 3 other women from our neighborhood. By Saturday morning, I was getting sympathetic texts from people I barely knew. "Heard about you and Zoya. So sorry. Let me know if you need anything. Jennifer from 2 streets over. Can't believe she did that to you. You're better off without her. Mike, who lived across the street and had never spoken to me beyond casual waves. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here, going through divorce myself. Sandra from the corner house." The attention was uncomfortable, but it was also strategic. Every person who knew the truth was someone Zoya couldn't manipulate with her own version of events. Every neighbor who'd heard the real story was someone who'd see through whatever narrative she tried to construct. Monday morning, I was back at work, trying to focus on client projects and pretend my personal life wasn't imploding. My project partner Arjun knocked on my office door around 10 a.m. "You look like hell," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Thanks. That's exactly what I was going for." "Want to talk about it?" Arjun and I had worked together for 3 years. He was smart, reliable, and had a talent for seeing through corporate nonsense that made him an excellent project partner. He was also discreet, which made him a good friend. I gave him the abbreviated version. Zoya was cheating, I caught her, she moved out, we were getting separated. "Damn, man, I'm sorry." Arjun leaned back in his chair. "How are you holding up?" Honestly, better than I expected. The worst part was the uncertainty, the feeling like I was going crazy. Now that I know what was really happening, it's just a problem to solve. Very analytical of you. It's how I process things. She introduced a bug into the system, I identified it, now I'm removing it. Arjun laughed. Only you would describe divorce in terms of software debugging. It's not divorce yet, just separation. But yeah, same principle. We worked through lunch, reviewing client requirements for a new database implementation. The familiar rhythm of technical problem solving was therapeutic. Code didn't lie to you. Systems behaved predictably. Variables had defined values. Around 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Rafe. We need to talk." I showed the message to Arjun. "The other guy," I explained. "What's he want?" Probably to convince me this is all a misunderstanding, or to threaten me, or to negotiate some kind of arrangement where he gets to keep seeing my wife. What are you going to do? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I thought about it for a moment. In the old days, I might have ignored the message, or responded with something diplomatic, or agreed to meet somewhere neutral to work things out like adults. But the old days were over. I typed back, "Meet me at Murphy's Bar on Prospect Street, 6 p.m. Come alone." Murphy's was a neighborhood place, the kind of bar where construction workers grabbed beers after work and office people stopped for happy hour. It was public enough to prevent any serious confrontation, but casual enough that we could have a real conversation. I arrived at 5:45 and claimed a table in the back corner where I could see the entire room. I ordered a beer and reviewed the folder I'd brought, copies of all the evidence I'd collected, organized chronologically like a project timeline. Rafe walked in at exactly 6 p.m. He was dressed more casually than he'd been at my house, jeans and a polo shirt instead of business attire, but he still had that confident bearing that suggested he'd never encountered a problem he couldn't handle. He spotted me immediately and walked over. "Kellan? That's me. Have a seat." He sat down across from me and signaled the bartender for a beer. "Look, I want to apologize for the confusion the other day. I had no idea you were going to be home." "No confusion," I said. "Oh, you were coming to my house to sleep with my wife while I was supposed to be out of town. That's exactly what I thought was happening." Rafe's beer arrived. He took a long drink before responding. "It's complicated. Actually, it's pretty simple. You're having an affair with a married woman. She's been bringing you to her husband's house. I documented everything and filed for separation. What part is complicated?" "Zoya told me your marriage was over. She said you were just staying together for financial reasons, that you were planning to separate anyway." I opened my folder and pulled out a printed email. "This is from Zoya to our mortgage company, dated 3 weeks ago. She was inquiring about refinancing options to lower our monthly payments. Does that sound like someone planning to separate?" Rafe read the email, his confident expression starting to crack. "Here's another one," I continued, pulling out a second document. "Zoya's inquiry to a travel agent about vacation packages for 2 people, dated last month. She was planning our anniversary trip to Ireland. Still think she told you the truth about our marriage being over?" "She said you didn't pay attention to her anymore, that you were more interested in your work than your relationship." Maybe that was true, but instead of talking to me about it, she decided to solve the problem by bringing you to our house while I was paying for it. I pulled out the access logs and spread them across the table. The pages made a dry, papery sound as they fanned out, columns of dates and times catching the low light of the bar. I flattened them with my palm, lining them up so there was no mistaking the pattern, no room for interpretation. My finger tapped one entry, then another, a slow, deliberate rhythm. 17 times, Rafe. You used our guest access code 17 times in 2 months? You've been in my house more recently than some of my actual friends." Rafe stared at the papers. His jaw tightened, Adam's apple bobbing once as he swallowed. The confidence he'd walked in with drained away, replaced by something smaller and more defensive. He didn't touch the logs, didn't try to push them back toward me. "I didn't know she was lying. Now you do. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "What do you mean?" He finally looked up, eyes flicking to my face and then away again, as if hoping to find an exit sign I hadn't noticed. I leaned forward. The edge of the table pressed into my forearms, grounding me. I kept my voice even, almost conversational. "I mean, are you going to keep seeing her now that you know she's a liar, or are you going to find someone who's actually available?" Rafe finished his beer and stood up. He drained it too fast, foam clinging to his lip before he wiped it away with the back of his hand. The chair legs scraped loudly against the floor, drawing a few glances from nearby tables. "This is messed up, man. I don't need this kind of drama in my life. Then stay away from my wife. Your ex-wife, he corrected, the word sharp, a reflex more than a considered jab. Not yet, but soon. He walked away without another word. I finished my beer and drove home, feeling like I'd accomplished something important. Not revenge, exactly, but clarity. Everyone involved now knew exactly where they stood. Tuesday morning brought a call from Zoya. We need to talk, she said without preamble. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath, the careful control. I'm listening. Not on the phone. Can you meet me for coffee? Why? I asked, staring out the kitchen window at a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted to rain. Because there are things you don't understand. About why this happened, about what I was thinking, about what we could still salvage. I almost laughed. The sound came out short and humorless. Zoya, I understand perfectly. You were bored or lonely or whatever, so you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it. You brought him to our house because it was convenient and exciting. You lied to both of us to keep it going. What else is there to understand? It's not that simple. It really is. I felt oddly calm saying it, like stating a fact that had already settled into place. Please, Kellan, one conversation. If you still want to go through with the separation after that, fine. But give me a chance to explain. I thought about it. Part of me was curious to hear what explanation she'd constructed, what narrative she'd built to justify her choices. Part of me wanted to see if she'd learned anything from getting caught. I traced a crack in the countertop with my finger while she waited on the other end of the line, the silence stretching. Fine. One conversation. Murphy's Bar, tomorrow at 6 p.m. I was thinking somewhere more private. Murphy's Bar, nothing. And Zoya, don't bring Rafe. She was quiet for a moment. I could almost picture her processing that, replaying past conversations in her head. How do you know about Rafe? I know everything about Rafe. See you tomorrow. Zoya arrived at Murphy's Bar 15 minutes late, which was typical. In 8 years of marriage, she'd been on time for exactly 3 events: our wedding, her job interview at the healthcare company, and the closing on our house. Everything else operated on what I'd learned to call Zoya Standard Time, which meant adding 20 minutes to whatever she promised. She looked different, thinner, like she hadn't been eating regularly. Her hair was shorter, styled in a way I'd never seen before. She was wearing clothes I didn't recognize, a black dress that seemed too formal for a neighborhood bar, jewelry that caught the light in expensive ways. You look good, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Rested. I've been sleeping better lately. She ordered white wine, which surprised me. Zoya had always been a beer person, claimed wine gave her headaches. But then again, she'd apparently been a lot of things I didn't know about. So, I said, explain. She took a sip of wine and gathered herself like she was about to give a presentation. It started innocently. Rafe was helping me look for investment properties. You know we've talked about buying rental real estate. We talked about it once 2 years ago. You said it was too much work. I changed my mind. I thought it could be good for our future, give us passive income, help us retire earlier. Okay, how did looking at rental properties turn into using our guest access code 17 times? Her carefully constructed composure slipped slightly. You really did document everything. I told you, I'm good at debugging problems. Continue. We started meeting for coffee to discuss properties, then lunch to review contracts, then dinner to celebrate when we found something promising. And then hotel rooms to celebrate even more? Zoya's face flushed. It wasn't supposed to happen. We were working late on a purchase agreement, had a few drinks, and things just developed. Things developed, like a software update. Don't be sarcastic, Kellan. This is hard enough. Hard for who? You're not the one who came home to find evidence that your spouse was lying about everything. She finished her wine faster than I'd ever seen her drink anything. You want to know the truth? The real truth? That would be refreshing. You stopped seeing me, not just physically, but actually seeing me. When was the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? When was the last time you planned something for us to do together that didn't involve your work, or your projects, or your technical conferences? I thought about it. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had been focused on work, especially the past year when we'd landed several major clients, but that didn't seem like grounds for bringing another man to our house. So instead of talking to me about feeling neglected, you decided to solve the problem by having an affair. I tried talking to you. Remember last Christmas when I suggested we take a cooking class together? You said you were too busy with the Morrison project. Remember when I asked if we could plan a real vacation, not just a long weekend visiting your parents? You said we couldn't afford it right after buying new furniture. We couldn't afford it. and the Morrison project was worth $40,000 to us. To you, Kellan. It was worth $40,000 to you. I never saw any of that money. It went straight into your savings account for your retirement planning. Our savings account? Our retirement? When did you start thinking of anything as ours instead of yours? The question hung between us like a challenge. I realized I didn't have a good answer. Even if all of that is true, I said finally, it doesn't justify what you did. If you were unhappy, we could have gone to counseling. We could have had this conversation months ago. We could have figured out how to fix things. Could we? Really? When was the last time you changed your mind about anything important because of something I said? Again, I didn't have a ready answer. Rafe listened to me, Zoya continued. He was interested in my opinions about properties, about investments, about what I wanted for the future. He made me feel like my thoughts mattered. So you brought him to our house? That was a mistake. I know that now. Which part was the mistake? Bringing him to our house or getting caught? Zoya signaled for another wine. Both, I guess. We sat in silence while her drink arrived. The bar was filling up with the after-work crowd, construction workers and office people decompressing from their days, normal people with normal problems. What do you want from this conversation? I asked. I want to know if there's any chance we can work this out. Work what out? Our marriage, our relationship. 8 years, Kellan. That has to count for something. I pulled out my phone and showed her the separation paperwork I'd filed. It counted for something. It counted for me documenting everything carefully before I made any decisions. It counted for me giving you 72 hours to collect your belongings instead of just changing the locks. It counted for me meeting you here tonight instead of having my attorney handle all communication. That's it? 8 years and you're just done? I'm not the one who ended our marriage, Zoya. You did that when you gave Rafe our guest access code. She started crying, which I'd expected. Zoya had always cried when she was frustrated or cornered, and this conversation was probably both. I made a mistake, she said. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean we have to throw away everything we built together. What did we build together? Really? You just spent 20 minutes telling me how I ignored you, how I didn't listen to you, how I treated our money like my money and our decisions like my decisions. Doesn't sound like we built much of anything. We built a home. I built a home. You brought your boyfriend to it. Zoya finished her second wine and stood up. I guess that's it then. I guess it is. She walked toward the door, then turned back. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just about getting caught, but about how it happened. You deserved better than that. Yeah, I said. I did. After she left, I sat in the booth for another hour, nursing my beer and thinking about the conversation. She wasn't wrong about some things. I had been focused on work, maybe too focused. I had made financial decisions without consulting her as much as I should have. I had probably taken our relationship for granted. But none of that changed the fundamental equation. She'd chosen to solve our problems by lying to me for months while bringing another man to our house. That wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. That was a deliberate pattern of deception that required planning and sustained effort. I drove home to a house that felt different now. Quieter, but not in a lonely way. More like the quiet of a system running efficiently without unnecessary processes consuming resources. Wednesday morning, I called our attorney to finalize the separation agreement. Thursday, I changed all the passwords on our shared accounts. Friday, I started looking into what it would take to refinance the house in my name only. By the following Monday, I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt or betrayed or confused. I was just ready to move forward. The debugging process was complete. The malicious code had been identified and removed. The system was stable again. 3 weeks after Zoya moved out, I discovered that removing her from my daily life was easier than removing her from my social circle. Apparently, 8 years of marriage creates a complex web of shared connections, mutual friends, and overlapping social obligations that don't automatically dissolve when you file separation papers. The first complication came from Jennifer Martinez, Zoya's colleague who lived in our neighborhood. Jennifer had been to our house for dinner parties, knew both of us reasonably well, and had apparently decided that our separation was a temporary misunderstanding that required her intervention. She showed up at my door on a Saturday morning while I was reorganizing the garage, a project I'd been putting off for months but suddenly had time to tackle. Kellan, we need to talk, she announced, walking past me into the living room without being invited. Good morning to you too, Jennifer. This thing with you and Zoya has gone far enough. You're both being stubborn, and it's affecting everyone who cares about you. I followed her into the living room, curious about where this conversation was heading. How so? She's staying with her friend Evelyn, sleeping on a couch, barely eating. She looks terrible. And you're acting like nothing happened, like 8 years of marriage can just be erased because of one mistake. One mistake. Okay, maybe it was more than one mistake, but the point is, people work through these things. Marriage is about forgiveness, about commitment, about not giving up when things get difficult. I sat down on the couch and gestured for Jennifer to do the same. Did Zoya ask you to come here? She doesn't know I'm here. I came because I think you're both making a huge error and someone needs to talk sense into you. What did she tell you happened? Jennifer looked uncomfortable. She said you caught her having an emotional affair with someone, and instead of trying to work through it, you immediately filed for separation. Emotional affair? She said it never got physical, that you were upset about some text messages and coffee meetings, but that you blew everything out of proportion. I walked to my office and returned with a folder containing printed photos, access logs, and credit card statements. I spread them across the coffee table like I was presenting a project timeline. This is Zoya and Rafe Ketter entering the Marriott downtown, I said, pointing to one of Sasha's photos. This is a credit card charge for a hotel room that same afternoon. These are access logs showing someone used our guest code to enter our house 17 times while I was at work. Jennifer stared at the evidence. I don't understand. She brought him here, Jennifer, to our house, multiple times, while I was paying the mortgage and thinking my wife was at work. But she said, she lied to you, just like she lied to me and just like she lied to him. Zoya told Rafe that our marriage was already over, that we were just staying together for financial reasons. Does that sound like someone who made one mistake and wants to work things out? Jennifer picked up one of the hotel photos, studying it closely. This is definitely her. That's definitely her. And you have proof they were in your house? I showed her the access logs with timestamps. 17 times in 2 months, including the day I was supposed to be at a work conference in Chicago. Jennifer set down the photos and leaned back on the couch. She told me you were being unreasonable, that you wouldn't even discuss counseling or trying to save the marriage. Hard to save something that was already broken. I just didn't know how broken until I started paying attention. We sat in silence for a few minutes while Jennifer processed the information. Finally, she looked up at me. I'm sorry, Kellan. I had no idea it was this bad. Most people don't. Zoya's good at managing her image. What are you going to do now? Now I'm going to finish reorganizing my garage, refinance my house, and figure out what I want my life to look like going forward. And Zoya? Zoya can figure out her own life. She's 35 years old and has a good job. She'll be fine. After Jennifer left, I realized the conversation was probably the first of many I'd have, with people who'd heard Zoya's version of events. The thought was exhausting, but also clarifying. I didn't owe anyone explanations about my personal decisions, and I wasn't responsible for managing other people's opinions about my marriage. That afternoon, my phone rang. Sasha. How are you holding up? She asked. Better than expected. Jennifer Martinez stopped by this morning to advocate for Zoya. Apparently, the story going around is that I overreacted to an emotional affair. Of course it is. Zoya's always been good at spinning narratives. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. She did the same thing in high school when she got caught cheating on her boyfriend. Convinced half our friend group that he was controlling and paranoid, that she was just talking to other guys because she felt trapped. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I hoped she'd grown up, and because you seemed happy together, at least from the outside. I thought about that. Were we happy? Really? You seemed content. But looking back, I realized Zoya did most of the talking when you two were together. You mostly just listened and went along with whatever she wanted to do. Huh. Don't get me wrong, you weren't miserable or anything, but I never saw you light up around her the way you do when you're talking about work projects or technical stuff you're excited about. After we hung up, I spent the evening thinking about Sasha's observation. She was right. I had been content with Zoya, but not particularly energized by our relationship. We'd fallen into comfortable routines that worked well enough, but didn't inspire much passion or growth. Maybe that's what had driven Zoya to seek excitement elsewhere. Maybe our marriage had been failing slowly for years, and the affair was just the symptom that finally made the problem visible. But even if that was true, it didn't change my decision. A relationship that required one person to lie and betray the other person's trust wasn't worth saving, regardless of what problems had led to that point. Monday morning, I met with our attorney to finalize the separation agreement. The process was surprisingly straightforward since we didn't have children or significant shared assets beyond the house. She's agreed to sign off on the refinancing, the attorney told me. Once that's complete, you'll own the property outright and she'll have no further financial obligations. What about her personal belongings? She's requested access to collect the rest of her things this weekend. I recommend you not be present during that process. Fine by me. Tuesday evening, Arjun invited me out for dinner and drinks. We went to a new restaurant downtown, the kind of place with creative cocktails and small plates that encouraged lingering conversations. You seem different, he said after we'd ordered. More relaxed, maybe? I feel different, like I've been holding my breath for months and finally remembered how to exhale. No regrets about the separation? I considered the question seriously. I regret that our marriage failed. I regret that we couldn't figure out how to communicate better before it got to this point. But I don't regret ending it once I discovered what was really happening. Think you'll stay in the house? For now. It's a good house, and I like the neighborhood. Plus, I've got all the smart home systems configured exactly the way I want them. Arjun laughed. Only you would factor home automation into post-divorce housing decisions. The cameras and access logs are what saved me from years of uncertainty and gaslighting. I'm keeping the security system. Fair enough. What about dating? Ready to get back out there? Eventually. But first I want to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to accommodate someone else's needs and preferences all the time. Sounds healthy. We'll see. The next few weeks settled into a new rhythm. I worked on projects that interested me, spent time with friends I'd neglected during my marriage, and slowly began to envision what my life might look like going forward. The house felt different, not empty, but spacious, like a system running efficiently without unnecessary background processes consuming resources. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to finding out what came next.